Welcome to Reframing Perspectives, the podcast where we challenge traditional thinking and explore the power of empathy in conscious leadership, personal growth, and human connection. I'm Dr. Payal Beri, and in each episode, we dive into thought-provoking conversations that expand perspectives and spark transformation. Because empathy reframes perspectives. Let's begin. So I'm single, and I've chosen to be single, and I'm happy being single. And there's this weight that gets carried, this idea that because of my relationship status and because of how I move and navigate this world a little differently than what's societally expected of me, that there's a treatment that I get to put up with that someone else doesn't. What happens is that there's this notion that because you're a single woman, you actually get treated in a very vulnerable way. For example, in social settings, you get left off of vacations or trips because there's this assumption of like, well, you wouldn't want to go. And it's like, you're my friends. Why wouldn't I want to be there? Regardless of you being single or whether you're being married, there's always these questions. And for a single woman, it's this head tilt with, isn't it always hard to be the single one? When are you going to find a partner? As if my autonomy is some kind of a problem. There is this idea and notion of being single is being incomplete, and that there must be something tortured within myself that I have chosen to not partner up. Instead of the fact that I have taken this time to actually understand myself, that in my 20s and my early 30s, when I did center partnership and relationships so much, I didn't ever take the time to understand who I was outside of this identity of my worth that it needs to be tied to a relationship. And when I actually took the space and built a life that I really enjoy, that I'm really happy with, and I took the time to nurture things like my business that I really, really enjoy working in. I love podcasting. I love the work that I get to do with mission-driven organizations. It's really fun for me. I also have a ton of friends. I have a lot of friends, and all these friends provide some different kind of nourishment to me. I have my entrepreneur friends where we get to really get into it and talk about entrepreneurship, about business, about sales, about marketing, whatever it may be, about our work, our purpose. There's a relationship there that is, my other friends can't necessarily relate to. But then I've got friends that I've known forever and, who we have deep conversations. We have deep conversations about life, where we meet each other with where they're at. By me being in the state that I'm in doesn't mean that I negate or reject, the life choices that they've made and vice versa. So we're able to champion and support each other in what's going on in your life beyond this identity of a partnership. And when I'm able to have those relationships, what this does is that because I have such beautiful relationships and friendships, there's so much fulfillment that I experience all the time. And so because I am genuinely happy, I am happy with the people I surround myself with, the family time that I get to spend with my parents and my nieces. And I genuinely enjoy that because when you're anchored into yourself and you're very well settled into yourself, you make better decisions. You make better choices. You find contentment. You're not creating tension. You're not finding chaos in things. If anything, this actually makes me a better partner to someone because when I look at my friends who are married and I see them for where they're at, the friends that I see who are happily married is because they don't actually center each other in their relationships. Their partners are a big part of their life, of course, but they have a fulfilling life and this partner gets to be a part of that. And they see each other as friends and they see each other with deep respect. They cheer each other on. And those friendships, to be honest, those married couples that are in that who understand and have a really strong understanding of own identity and this partnership and the role this partnership plays in their world, in their life, those are the friendships that I notice as a single woman. I am able to have such healthy relationships with those friends versus the friends that have made their entire life their identity around their partner. And everything must come from this individual, which is not even healthy or realistic. But when they center the relationship and everything else is just peripheral, those are the ones that are, where you get judged more. And it's typically because they just have this very diluted way of looking at that type of life. But I look at this as me being in the position that I'm in, where I'm genuinely happy. I've, chosen to be single for now. And, I can open that door or maybe leave it closed. Who knows? But it either way, that should not be the problem, right? It's just a different experience and one that deserves the same dignity and curiosity and inclusion as anything else. Because when we frame singlehood as lacking, as incomplete, as if we're missing out on some kind of richness, then we're missing out and we're reducing the value of that woman, of that individual, right? Of being able to create and innovate and lead and do things that are maybe outside of that and contribute to society in ways that could be so deeply fulfilling and that society then benefits from, right? So this discomfort isn't necessarily about being a single woman. It's about the mirror that a single woman holds up to the other parts of society that are still tethered to this idea that your identity is tied to partnership. A few years ago, I was part of a friends group and I'd known them for years. And they were all coupled up. They're all married. And I was the only one who was single. And I'll never forget this, that there was a husband in the group who bullied me for years. Subtle digs, sarcastic remarks, underhanded comments. And the piece about that is, no one noticed it because it wasn't on anyone's radar. It was something that I had to mentally prep myself every single time that I would go to a social gathering and knew that this person was there. Every single time I had to mentally check and knew that he's going to make some kind of comment at me. And he did it because I did not have a partner. If I had a partner, if there was someone standing next to me, I can guarantee that that type of bullying wouldn't have happened. It's because of being single in these environments that then people think that they're vulnerable and you can say whatever and, make whatever remarks and this person's just going to take it. Well, I did for a little bit. I let it go, not going to make a big deal out of it, right? Shrunk myself. But then finally there came to a time where I was like, I'm done. I'm not going to take this anymore. And when I stepped up for myself, then of course it blew up. And that's when people came in and recognized it. But even though they recognized that the behavior was not acceptable and not okay, the idea was still that, well, that's just who he is. He's, intimidated because you're smart and he's a little insecure and I'm expected to tolerate it. Or because I'm the single person in the group, I get scapegoated. Well, of course, I exited that group and, got my peace of mind. And it actually was the best thing that could have happened. But that's not an isolated incident. It's a pattern. It's this idea that when you are an individual and you're not partnered up, that you can't be taken seriously, that your responsibilities are not as heavy of a load. So when you're in corporate, when you're working, then you could be left off of discussions. You could be left off of this idea of like, well, I've got a family to raise. So like, I need to double down. I need to build a bigger, retirement savings, whatever it is, right? I've got an education. I've got to fund my kids' schools. There's this idea of like, you don't have to worry. You don't have a family. So it's okay. As if having a partner or a child is the only way to be deemed responsible, that you are only an adult if you have kids, if you are in a adult relationship. It shows up in our legislation that polices women's bodies, right? It shows up in how single women are, and women in general, when it comes to legislation, men just have the same rights everywhere. But why is it that a woman's rights are questionable? our bodies based off of state by state get to be decided on what happens. And that I never understood this, because if we're human beings, we all have bodies that require support and health care and everything. Why is it that it's up for debate? We don't look at it as, in animals that like, oh, well, a female dog and a male dog are going to be treated differently if you take them to a vet. So it's like almost like animals are given better treatment than women are, where single women are overlooked in financial systems, real estate, even in social experiences. Our laws and everything, that if you look at it, it's actually supported if you are married. There are way more tax benefits for you if you are married. You are always paying a singles tax, right? The brunt of everything is on you. If you never choose to get married or never have a partner, then you are fully responsible for every single thing that happens in your life. You are responsible for you don't have someone to share and split that responsibility with. And then there's this idea that if a woman who is single, that she should not outpace anyone. She should minimize herself. But what if we rejected all of this? What if we actually were crazy enough and reimagined that the entire way that we relate to power and we relate to evolution and we relate to success is about understanding how we can actually not even coexist, but truly relate and collaborate with each other? What if instead of feeling threatened by women who are providing some kind of purpose and meaningful work into society that may show up a little differently, that we actually look at it as an opportunity? If we zoom out a little bit more, because of course I'm a nerd and I think about everything from an anthropological perspective or psychology perspective. If we are these human species where we deem that we are the most intelligent species on this planet, right? And yet we've somehow still made hierarchy a hallmark of progress. And we've decided that dominance equals leadership and that submission equals order. But if we look at the animal kingdom and we look at examples of what exists of collaboration and we look at what sustains certain species, we can actually see that there are species where females actually hold the power and make decisions that are communal and through consensus and not force. Let's take orcas, right? Orcas, we know, are some of the most intelligent mammals on Earth. Super intelligent, almost to be scared of, right? But they rely on matriarchs to lead pods through generations of wisdom and emotional intelligence. Even elephants who are known to have the sharpest memory. And in their social structures, they're guided by older female leaders who ensure survival through collective care. So it makes me wonder, what are we doing, right? Why in this so-called most advanced species on this planet are we stuck in this caveman days and beyond that even script where one gender must dominate the other? It doesn't make sense. Why do we continue to find the strength through aggression and anger? Aren't you tired of being angry? Aren't you tired? Instead of just looking at collaboration and intuition and being oh my God, you're brilliant and you're brilliant and be coming together. We've glorified this predator instead of honoring protection, right? We've mistaken this dominance for evolution, where true evolution is rooted in interdependence. If we really look at this and we look at the roles that we play, why are we, as the most advanced species, pitting ourselves against each other? If we want to take it biologically, if we really want to take it there, I mean, women endure some of the most painful experiences that men's bodies could not withstand. Childbirth, as example, right? One of the most excruciating physical experiences. Here is a woman's body that widens 10 centimeters to bring life out of her body. And yet somehow we're labeled as the weaker sex and we're the weaker gender and we're fragile. Make it make sense. What I really think is that we're coddling strength here. We're coddling fragility. We're oh, it's okay. It's like that spoiled kid that we're just oh, we just so don't want to deal with his tantrums, that just give into it. But what we're doing is, by giving into this system that divides all of us, that divides this idea that a woman is discarded because she is of no use unless she's procreating or unless she's partnered up and she can boost the ego of a man. And we're not actually thinking about our long term. And that is, I believe, why we are in the state of society that we're in right now, because we have coddled this idea of, oh, I just don't want to deal with it. So let's just coddle this and let's just like look at, take care of it. And now it's just like brought us to a place where we are in this system that's designed from men and man-made ideas, but not necessarily looking at it from what we have right here together. Even in ancient mythology, and we look at like the early societies, right? Power was about partnership, not punishment. Hi, so I'm pausing this episode right now to remind you to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to it. It's the way that we can really make sure to grow the audience, grow the community, and make sure that we're actually giving you the type of episodes that you want to listen to. Now, back to the episode. Indigenous traditions honored feminine for her intuition and her creation and her ability to hold a collective. But as civilizations industrialized, right, the feminine became something to manage and not something to revere. We look at it as there is a collective experience that women are able to have, but instead of looking at that, we look at it as something that just needs to be like, it's too dainty, right? It's on the side. And I grew up with incredible men, right? I have a brother, I have mostly guy cousins, and my circle has always had really wonderful guy friends, like smart, kind, curious, who can hold a conversation. In fact, one of my best cousins, my best guy friends, who's a cousin, he is so emotionally available, intelligent, and smart. And we have such beautiful conversations around like the daily stoic on emotional evolution. And he's about to become a father. And, he's actively talking about what does it mean for me to be a present father? What does it mean to me to be in relationship with my wife, and how we're going to create this dynamic with, there's so much respect there. There's so much of this understanding of, and when I see that, I see the potential of what our bigger society could be. When I see that relationship, when I see him talk, one, I'm just like, I get so like emotional and get so like warmed up because, he's 4 years younger than me. And the way he's so insightful and his kindness and his empathy and value, right? Like there's a value of who he is, of what he does, and there's value of what his wife does and who she is. And there's this understanding and this partnership and this friendship. It's not about I must submit to you or you must submit to me. It's truly of this like understanding because there's a value that is given to both and a respect that's given to both. I see that as proof and opportunity of what our larger society could be if we looked at people that way. If we actually looked at the fact that we can sit around a table and we can bring our thoughts and we can be curious and we can listen and we don't have to coddle fragile egos. It's not about that because we've done the work and we understand that every individual brings something special to our society and to our community. And I think about those women who have chosen different paths, right? The ones who weren't in the spotlight, the ones who raised children, the ones who built communities and dedicated themselves to the public good. They did that because they believe in the collective. And, I really think about this as if we're smart enough to invent, to lead, to nurture, to innovate, if we're smart enough to go to space, then why are we still rewarding the loud voices in the room versus the most collaborative minds? When we think about this, I really believe that when we elevate women, we don't shrink men. We elevate everyone. And I think that's the key piece is that when we look at every individual, regardless of their status of their relationship, we expand that room, we expand the vision, we expand possibilities. So instead of framing it as something, to be hoarded, we need to look at this as how do we come together? How do we bring respect within each other? And, true evolution, isn't that really about shared intelligence? Like if we looked at opportunities and we looked at the way that things are invented, we would look at them not necessarily, if we're truly a capitalistic society, by the way, then we wouldn't care about who it's coming from. We would care about, what's this invention? Can we make money from it, right? That's what really matters in a capitalistic society. So how have we, even in the society that we live in, still found a way to be conflicted with that. And it's, of course, it's ego, and we know that. And it's a fragility that we have. But there's this idea that we have to kind of remove. Women are penalized in so many ways. The way that women are treated as either threats or afterthoughts, the way that they're expected to be quieter, less opinionated, less visible because we don't come with a partner, right? I'll never forget this. This was over a year ago, and I was out with, for a girls' night, and there was this woman who was there who is very sweet, very kind, lived a very homogenous life, followed the path, and, was approaching 50. And she very, very curiously asked, how do your married friends feel comfortable having you around at wedding festivities and their events, knowing that you are single? And this was a genuine question. And I blinked, and my first response was, well, my friendships aren't based off of the status of my relationship. They're not determined by that. But the question wasn't obviously about me. And of course, because of the work that I do, like, I was very clear about that. I knew that when this was coming, I was like, there's something deeper here. And, she doubled down and said it with such entitlement, so with such matter of fact. Payal, your life is very unnatural. You live an unnatural life because you don't have kids and you're not married. And it was said in this way as if, like, I have no worth because I do not follow that path. Of course, I got curious. I practice what I preach, and I, just ask questions and try to understand, where is this coming from? And it was coming from the fact that her daughter, who was 19 at the time and was questioning, like, why'd you get married? Why'd you have kids? What would your life look like if you didn't have them? Decided that she doesn't want to have kids and she doesn't want to get married. So it was like, these questions that are coming at me are because there's this fear in her about something that's different that her daughter wants. It's so different than the life that she's led, the life that she knows anyone around her that has led, that she wanted to see me. I am like 22 years older than that. And so she's looking at that as, what would her daughter's life be like, right? So that woman, although coming across very judgmental and very much as this idea that she can say anything in the way that she wants to say to me because she is in a natural life, right? But really, it just came down to the fact that I mirrored something that was different. And it was something different that she never expanded her mind to get curious about. And so when we're so conditioned to defining women by who they belong to, and that when a woman belongs to herself, people don't know where to place her, then we create these situations where we think that it's okay to talk to someone in a way that we wouldn't otherwise speak to a person who is partnered up. But what if single women, shocking here, but what if single women weren't anomalies? What if they're just an archetype of self-led living? I'm still part of the community. I still have value to add. But instead of being uncomfortable with it, it's about expanding that view and looking at, what is it that Payal is providing here that is just so exceptional, right? What is it that she's doing? What is it that any person in my life is doing? And so when we really think about the way that, we share this relationship, if we look at even our religious texts, I'll take Hinduism since that's what I grew up in. We have all these goddesses, right? And in fact, we have in Hinduism, there's a 9-day celebration of Navratri, which is a celebration of these 9 goddesses. And every goddess stands for something. So we have Saraswati, who's like a goddess of education and music. We have Lakshmi, who's the goddess of wealth and abundance. And in fact, when a baby girl is born, it's like, oh my gosh, we have Lakshmi in our house. Or when she gets married, it's like, oh, Lakshmi has come into our house. Like, there's a celebration of that. But then what I've always tried to understand is like, well, then how do we worship a woman as a goddess? And we like revere her in this way, but we dismiss her based on her relationship status in real life, right? What kind of a society are we building where the divine feminine in temples is respected and adored and preyed on, but then in our workplaces and legislation and in the way we speak to each other, it's diminished and it's treated as something discarded. So it's not even about religion, it's about reverence. And reverence doesn't begin in scripture, it begins in how we treat each other. And what if we stopped assigning roles based on our relationship status? And what if we actually looked at every human, whether you're a man, non-binary, you're a woman, as someone who has ideas, who has a personality, who has a drive, who has a heart, who is experiencing life? Because what if partnership was about co-visioning together? And what if we looked at it as you're not something different, but you're experiencing life in a different way, and we can just accept that? What if we stopped trying to tame powerful women and instead raised boys to meet strengths? So I don't have to dumb myself down to make a man feel secure in himself. As much as we are praising a man about his intelligence, we praise a woman about her intelligence. As much as we are praising or having her help around the house, we have him help around the house. We create some kind of equality here. And we look at this as equal contributing members of society. If our goal, if we actually think about this as a goal, as a human species who want to sustain and who want to keep living and don't want to go extinct, and there's obviously a high percentage of women who are choosing not to have kids and who are choosing to not get married, but it's because it's about finding that equal partner. Women are outpacing men right now. But if instead of trying to bring women down, we look at it as, okay, wow, that's wonderful. We have women up here. Let's bring our men up here and let's have an equal value. What if we stop dismissing, for example, stay-at-home moms and started honoring them as such a cultural architect to everything? We diminish them. They feel sometimes so, invalidated. I'm sure if you have a conversation with your mom, she feels like if she was a stay-at-home mom her whole life, there's so much value given to someone who's out there earning money, but yet there isn't value for the woman who is actually caring for the whole family structure. I know in my home, my mother is the glue to our family. She plays such a huge role in our life. And if we stopped asking women to prove their worth and we started asking society to prove if it can be worthy of women, aren't we better than this? This idea of that women who are in any relationship status, men who are in any relationship status, we can co-create together. We look at women like Madame Curie, we look at Malala, we look at Angela Davis, we look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we look at Cleopatra, Amelia Earhart. Like, these are all women who have contributed to the world. But also, like, look at your grandmother, your best friend, the single mom who teaches and raises and feeds a household. Like, it shouldn't be about which woman gets to have a certain point system of value associated with them. It simply is the fact that we as a society, if we want to truly evolve, we look at it as every single person has a role to play. And it's not about who is winning in this status. It's looking at it as what value are we adding because of what we have within ourselves. And maybe the most powerful thing we can do is to choose not to compete, but to co-create with each other. And we're not here to prove that we're better. We're here to remember that we're all on the same side. We're all on the same side. So I ask you that let me start that over. So I ask you that to ask yourself, where can I elevate someone without needing to shrink myself? Or where can I reframe the way that I even position a question to somebody? Because when women rise, we all rise together. And that's not just a strategy or a cheesy line or anything like that. It really is that when we can stop making comments or thinking that we are entitled to question someone because they are single, because they are married, because they're divorced, because they're widowed, and we can actually look at them for who they are as an individual, that will truly reshape the way that we think about our society and how we want to see ourselves as a successful, thriving community. It's not about the status of our relationships. It's not about preying on an individual. It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play here. And when we lean into that, we can create something really magical. I really hope that you enjoy this episode. And I just have one favor to ask you. If you could just make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a rating and review, it's going to help us tremendously to make sure that we reach as many people as possible that you think should be listening to our episodes. I'll see you next week for another episode. And thank you so much for leaving that one review, that one subscription, and sharing this with your friends.